Fever Epidemic of 1793 presentation by Brittany Barron. So to begin, just to give some background information on the yellow fever virus, when looking at the phylogeny of yellow fever, it is a member of genus Flavivirus, and this is encompassed within the Flaviviridae family. Specifically, when looking at the genome, it is a single-stranded RNA, and it's about 10,500 to 11,000 nucleotides in length, which is a lot. Yellow fever has been known to cause hemorrhagic fevers. And in other words, what a hemorrhagic fever is, it's when a fever affects the body's ability to clot blood. And this is seen in some other diseases, but it's most known for yellow fever. Yellow fever is mostly found in tropical areas of South America and areas of Africa. And when we stop and think about this makes a lot of sense because today we now know that yellow fever is due to infected mosquitoes, and mosquitoes tend to thrive in these tropical, warm, humid areas. Now, even though we're looking specifically at the epidemic of 1793, the first documented case was quite before, and it was actually in 1648 in Yucatan, Mexico. And it was actually documented by a Mayan manuscript, which I thought was pretty cool. When looking at the outbreak of 1793, about 11,000 people were infected and 5,000 ended up passing away, which was around 10% of the population living in Philadelphia at the time, which is quite a bit. This resulted, of course, in a lot of fear and ended up in a mass exodus of Philadelphia. Now, we talk a lot about yellow fever and the results that it might have on humans at the time, but what does this virus look like? So this is an image that I retrieved from the CDC, and it depicts the yellow fever virus, and those purple spiky parts coming out of it, that's actually the envelope protein. Now, it's important to understand yellow fever as our understanding of this disease have changed from 1793 versus today. So when looking at 1793, it was believed that this disease was caused due to rotten vegetables, which we now know is not true, of course, because it is caused by mosquitoes. It was also believed before that it was contagious and it was passed between person to person, which we also know is that's no longer held true. It was also believed that it was due to French refugees. Now, this was also not true because it's not contagious, but what might have happened is it might have not been due to the French refugees, but more so the ships that were carrying them, because at the time there was a lot of trade going on between Africa, Europe, and the Americas, and it's very plausible that a mosquito could have somewhere along the way gotten on the ship and been brought over, and then the epidemic could have began that way. And then another popular theory was miasma theory that was causing yellow fever, which is something that we covered earlier in this class. So when looking at miasma theory, at the time there was a top physician in Philadelphia named Dr. Benjamin Rush, which I'm sure you are all familiar with. And he believed that the air was polluted, and that's what was causing people to get sick, was because of contamination in the air. And of course, we know all of these theories are no longer held true because we now know that it is due to infected mosquitoes. Now, when looking at any changes in definition, we do see the same symptoms of yellow fever, but it's more so now that we understand the why behind the symptoms when before it was not understood. So some classic symptoms of yellow fever are fever, chills, stomach pain, vomiting, often accompanied with black blood in the vomit, black stool, jaundiced skin and eyes, which is basically a discoloring of the skin and eyes towards a more yellow color, and skin blotches, which is due to bleeding. And this has been depicted throughout history pretty consistently, but now we just know the whys behind it. So, when looking at this image from 1876, it shows a man who is pretty severely infected with yellow fever, and you can see those signature blotchy skin and the yellow skin and eyes. Now, when looking at medical treatments and prevention in 1793 versus today, we see that in 1793 there was a lot of social distancing. That means no more handshaking. There was also a mass exodus of Philadelphia, which I touched on before, and there was also there were isolation hospitals and orphanages. Now, this is because at the time, a lot of parents were abandoning their kids if they showed any signs of coughing or sneezing, because there was a lot of distrust and fear at the time, which is understandable. There was also sanitary laws that were put into place, and that was to hold people accountable and to clean up the city. There were also makeshift face coverings where people would dip handkerchiefs into vinegar or smoked tobacco, and that was supposed to help protect from the polluted air, which was, something that was held due to miasma theory. Another treatment for yellow fever was cold baths and drinking wine and hot brandy. And this was more of a natural method that Alexander Hamilton had suggested at the time. Now, today we see that we have a yellow fever vaccine, and then if somebody actually ends up contracting the fever, it's with supportive care. That's how we treat it. And just to go back to the mass exodus of Philadelphia really quickly, about 20,000 people had left Philadelphia, which is a lot for the time. Now, of course, there were some controversial treatments of the time in 1793, and a lot of them were from Dr. Benjamin Rush, and he believed in bloodletting, purgatives, and mercurial sweating powder. And what this mercury was supposed to do was supposed to ease the stomach. In addition, when looking at how views have changed in society between 1793 and now, it was originally very misunderstood. They thought it was transmittable from person to person. There was a lot of fear, distrust, of course, with parents abandoning their children. And there was actually a racist point of view at the time where a lot of white physicians, including Rush, believed that African Americans were immune. And of course, we know that this is not true. Today, it is understood as a virus and is transmittable via mosquitoes. It is something that's preventative, and if somebody does contract it, it is treated with supportive care. And it is now understood that it is more so region specific and not race related. I say it's region specific because mosquitoes tend to thrive in these warmer tropical areas. And when looking at some of the regions common to yellow fever, we can see in South America, those yellow dots are kind of where the hot spots are. And of course, the red region overall is where it's seen. And then on the right image of your screen, we can see Africa, and we can see it's mostly in Central Africa. And that is my presentation on yellow fever. Here I have my sources in case you want to check anything. Thank you so much.